Good day everyone, I'm David, moderator for this webinar. I welcome everyone for today's webinar, which is Navigating IEPs and 404s, a legal compliance guide. I would now like to introduce our presenter for today, Hope and Kirst. Hope and Kirst, MA, ESQ, is a licensed special education teacher and 25 plus years litigation attorney. Ms. Kirst was a special education teacher and special education coordinator in the New York City public schools for 18 years. She has a bachelor's degree in special education from Boston University, cum laude, a master's degree in special education from NYU, 30 plus postgraduate credits in educational supervision and administration, and her law degree from Brooklyn Law University. I would now like to hand over the floor to the speaker. Over to you, Hope.
Thank you very much. The older you get, the longer your bio is. We'll be talking today about the laws regarding students with disabilities in educational settings and the three federal laws that address the obligations of public schools, which include charter schools, to meet the needs of students with disabilities are the Individuals with Disabilities Education Act, which we call the IDEA, Section 504 of the Rehabilitation Act of 1973, which we refer to as Section 504, sometimes simply 504, and sometimes you'll hear that in connection with the term 504 plan, and Title II of the Americans with Disabilities Act of 1990, which is referred to quite simply as Title II. The federal regulations, state statutes, state regulations or rules. Going back to the federal laws, you have those three which I said before, and these three laws address the obligations of students in public school. So on the left side of your screen is the code. That's the act, the Individuals with Disability Education Act. And on the right side of the screen are the implementing regulations. Okay, so what is the IDEA? It's the nation's special education law. It applies to children who are aged 3 to 21, 22 in some states. We also look at federal policy for guidance. So those are called policy letters and policy support documents. Okay, so how does a child become eligible under an IEP? Under the IDEA for an IEP. Child find, first of all, which requires a school district, including a charter school, to identify, locate, and evaluate students that are suspected of having a disability that requires special education. And just a word about days. So there are calendar days, straight days, school days, business days. You have the two-step process. It's finding that there is a disability, and then that there is a need for specially designed instruction. So now we talk about the IEP. So once the eligibility is found, the school district or charter school must convene and develop an IEP, individualized education program, within 30 days, 30 calendar days. The anatomy of an IEP. You've got basically your present levels of academic achievement and functional performance, which we call a PLAF. Okay, so next we're going to talk again about that placement level of service. So every state is different. This is just an example of Arizona, A, B, C, D, E. So look at your state and how they determine. Okay, so here's some other stuff. These are notices. Procedural safeguards notice is about a 28-page document that is given to parents, and it basically is the law. In our 20 years of doing this, I could count on one hand the number of parents who said they read it. Okay, so now the 504 and the ADA. So 504 of the Rehabilitation Act of 1973, it's broader than the IDEA. It's concerned with discrimination and the provision of services to all individuals with disabilities. And so you have different subparts there. So 504 applies to preschool, elementary, and secondary education. The Americans with Disabilities Act, so the code is on the left side, and the right side is the implementing regulations. It applies to public entities and public accommodations. And then Title II of the ADA is it's equal opportunity to participate. So a word about Title II is guarantees the right to equal and full and equal enjoyment of public accommodations and commercial facilities operated by private entities. The difference between ADA and 504, so both were enacted to ensure that individuals with disabilities living in the United States would not be discriminated against because of their disability. Congress passed Section 504 in 1973, and the ADA was modeled after Section 504, and it made it into law in 1990. These are the differences between IDEA and 504. These are examples of discrimination that we see. And so the way a disability is defined under 504 and ADA is, I said before, physical or mental impairment that substantial limits. And this is a typical or a sample accommodation plan. It states what the documented physical and mental impairment is. And then a word or three about charter schools. Yes, they're public. They're semi-autonomous. So public school responsibility for students in private schools. So private school children are entitled to all special education, are entitled to some but not all special education and related services. So Section 3 applies to private schools, non-sectarian private schools. So parochial schools, no rights, absolute. They don't have to comply with any federal laws. Schools receive federal funding that must provide students with access to their records. And just going to run through, but basically what is a child entitled to was initially defined by the Supreme Court in 1982 in the case of Raleigh versus Hendrick Hudson. These are examples of violations that we see. And then they're different. When you file due process, it has to be based on either a substantive or a procedural violation. So before contacting an attorney, you want to, the school might want to do a facilitated IEP, which means that they ask the State Department of Education. Okay, that's it. It's you and me, David. So that's it. Thank you.
Oh, okay.
Okay, bye.
Bye-bye.